So you're a performer and you've got something really big coming up and you're getting kind of nervous. It's right before you're about to go on stage and you're thinking, oh, I'm really scared right now. But guess what? That's normal. That's totally normal. And in this video, Josh Cake and I have teamed up to show you how to overcome stage fright, showing you our tips and tricks that we use as experienced performers. So stay tuned. But before we get into the video, we should probably go and introduce ourselves. So I'm Micic. I have studied acting for 7 years and have experience on the stage as an ensemble performer, but also as a sole performer when I've done spoken word poetry. So I definitely have a bit of stage experience. However, I don't have as much as Josh Cake. So let's hear about Josh.
Thanks, Viv. Josh here. I've been performing for far too long. I started when I was about 6 doing school productions and then concerts and then doing music, and then I started working doing wedding music when I was 14 and got into theatres and then started doing stand-up comedy and comedy music and cabaret and poetry, and all in all, too many things for far too long. What I can tell you about stage fright is that it's about expectations, as most anxiety is. You have an expectation that something could go wrong, and that consumes your mind. I think it's comforting for me to think about best case scenarios, worst case scenarios, and expected, typical scenarios. So in a best case scenario, your art does whatever you want it to do. Maybe it touches a person's life and makes their day better. Maybe it brings you tremendous acclaim and everyone all over the world knows your name. I don't know what your best case scenario is, but it's nice to think about it. Your worst case scenario. I like to think of a worst case scenario as an angry mob hates your work so much that they drive you out of town. A long time ago, when we lived in tribes, this could have been an issue. But nowadays, you can just move to another city if that happens. You know, if people really, really, really hate you because of something that you made or did on stage, it's okay. There are other continents. We can now uproot to other continents. So I take some comfort in those backup options. Realistically, though, a worst case scenario from me would be endangering people. So burning down a theatre or presenting some work that makes people feel unsafe or has a significant negative impact on their life, on their health. So I try to examine my work to make sure that it's not hurtful in that way, and I try to follow safety guidelines and risk assessments and make sure that I'm not going to burn down the theatre. And having done those two things, I feel confident that my work isn't going to cause physical or emotional harm to people. So that's the best case scenario, that's the worst case scenario, and then what's your expected scenario? For me, it's always that good and bad things will happen when you perform or when you do anything in life. Some aspects will be positive, happy, things you wanted. Some will be negative, discouraging, things that you didn't want to happen. Going in knowing that some good and some bad things are going to happen can help you accept them when they arrive. So when positive things happen, you can feel good about it, you can take that forward, develop them, work on them, take confidence from them. When negative things happen, you can use them to inform your practice and grow as an artist. So my advice is to go into a performance knowing that positive and negative things will happen, and then when they do happen, that's showbiz, baby. That's part of it, and accepting that helps combat stage fright.
You can find out more about both of us in the description box below. But without further ado, let's get into our tips on how to overcome stage fright. So our first tip for overcoming stage fright is to imagine the end of a successful performance. So actually right now, close your eyes and just imagine what it would look like. So you'd be on stage looking out at the audience and they would be applauding because, you know why? Everyone in that audience is rooting for you. They totally support you. Even Josh and I, we're rooting for you. Everybody in the audience wants to see you. Josh and I want to see you. We are all rooting for you. So imagining the end of a successful performance kind of like gives you a goal in your mind to work towards, to aspire towards. And knowing that everybody is rooting for you just helps you feel a little more confident. So, Josh, how do you imagine a successful performance?
How do I envision the end of a successful performance? Often for me, that depends on what kind of emotion I'm trying to invoke. So when I'm making people laugh, it can be satisfying at the end of a performance to see how their body language has changed. If they came in stressed and rushed and beating the traffic, after an hour of laughing, they're relaxed. They seem calmer, happier, less stressed. Another example would be when I'm writing sad songs to make people cry. It's pretty satisfying to see tears on their face and to see the applause fade into fetching tissues and hankies and a big general shad sniffle. So it's a bit cruel, but when I've written a sad song and it ends from an audience perspective with a I feel like I've succeeded. So that's a fun thing to look forward to. However, I think when we envision the end of a performance, we need to think about everyone who's involved. Often we envision the audience and how they'll react and how they'll feel. It's also worth thinking about how you'll feel. How do you want to feel at the end of a performance? Do you want to feel proud of what you've done? Do you want to feel tired? Is that a sign for you that you've expended enough energy on stage? Focusing on how you want to feel at the end of a performance, and then adapting your performances, maybe even your lifestyle, to achieve that end result is positive. An example would be when someone's on tour and they're doing heaps and heaps of performances, and at the end they just feel burnt out. That's not how they want to feel at the end of the day. So maybe at that point they can take time to adjust their schedule or get some sleep and hopefully aim towards feeling whatever they want to feel at the end of a performance, whether that's happy or proud or satisfied, rather than tired, angry or stressed. And that can apply to any workplace. That's not just for the arts. Envisioning how you want to feel during and after your job or the task at hand can give you a metric by which to judge how you actually feel, and then adjust what you're doing so that you end up feeling the way you want to feel. Your feelings are as valid as the audience's.
So tip number 2 is to rehearse. Just even if you feel like you know your lines, go over them. Make sure you know them. And prior to performance, make sure you're attending every rehearsal session that you can. Because the more rehearsal you do, the more confident you'll be in how well you know what you're going to say, what you're going to do. You'll be fine, as long as you know what you're doing. So, Josh, how do you rehearse for your comedy routines and your TED Talk?
For quite a long time, I've had a routine around practice for music. So I'll practice piano and guitar and singing regularly. Stand-up comedy has always been something that I do in response to an audience. So the only way for me to practice that is by getting in front of an audience and doing it. I think it's worth finding what's crucial to your discipline and then achieving those conditions as much as you can. So if your performance style requires an audience, get an audience together and perform to them. If you'd rather have some practice space before that, find other people doing what you do. So a thing stand-ups like to do is get a bunch of us together, maybe we get a dozen of us, and we do stand-up to each other, and that's 11 people who laugh if it's funny and give us feedback, because it's an art form that can only be done in dialogue with an audience. For things like music, I can do a lot of practice by myself before I get in front of an audience. I think practice has got to be fun. That's hugely important. If you don't enjoy your practice or you don't see the point of it, it's not going to get very far. So making it as fun as possible is important. Finding challenges or games to play in the middle of a practice session can be heaps of fun. And an example for piano is getting a drill and doing it slowly and then up in the pace and up in the pace and just turning it up on a metronome until it gets to ridiculous levels and seeing at what point your fingers just can't keep up. And an example of how to do that for acting, I suppose, is all the drama games and listening games that you can play. I think introducing a sense of fun to your practice helps, and I think having a clear picture of your motivation, knowing why you're practicing. You're never practicing just for the sake of practice. You're practicing to get somewhere or to achieve a skill, or so that when you perform, you have the impact you want. Knowing your motivation and having fun with practice, I think, are crucial.
Tip number 3 is to get into character. So whether or not you're an actor or just a spoken word performer, if you're any kind of performer is putting on a persona. So taking the time to get yourself into that character's mindset is super, super important. So for example, in my method acting video, I spoke about creating a character playlist, but this could also work for you if you're just putting on like a public persona. You create a playlist of songs that reflect how, that reflect the energy that you want to put out. So that is just one really good way to get into character, and I will talk more about this in a future video. But Josh, how do you get into character?
I think that's hugely subjective. I know people do so many different things. We've all heard of actors changing the way they eat and live and even what time they go to bed to get that method acting success. I think for me, I've always enjoyed taking my character to different places. So perhaps with a few other people from the cast, we might go to a cafe and interact as that character, or you might be that character as much as is safe and acceptable and not scary to other people. You might be that character when ordering pizza or, at the gym or at the shops or anywhere. If I'm having an interaction with someone I don't know that well and, don't need to be myself for, I can just, ring up a pizza shop as the character I'm doing and saying, "Hello, this is Brother Chris. I would like to order 2 pizza." That's just a memory of a character that I did that for a couple of years ago. Finding fun ways to play with that character that don't hurt anybody are probably my favorite way to get into character. Just applying that character in various situations in the world where it's harmless and seeing how people respond to it. It gives you a lot of information about your character and which parts of it are fun to implement. I am speaking mainly from a comedy acting setting, so we are designed to follow the fun. I don't think I've ever played a character on stage that wasn't for a comedy. I have played non-comedy characters on film. Usually the way I get into character there is by walking through the script and that specific scenario as much as I can, but also walking through other fictional scenarios with the other actors. So I found for comedy acting, I can just take the character anywhere and it's a funny character, have fun with it. For serious acting, I need the other characters to which that character relates, and then we can play out scenarios together. But playing with your character and taking it through as many different scenarios as possible, I think helps you to gain a broader perspective of how this character interacts with other people and with themselves, both within the context of the script and the broader world.
Tip number 4 is to breathe and relax before you go on stage. So just take a moment now to practice with me. You breathe slowly, in through the nose, hold, out through the mouth, hold. So let's do it. And just do this a few times over until you actually feel calm. Because breathing is a really good way to just make sure that you slow down your pulse and you're relaxing before you get on there. Another thing to also be wary of is to relax points of tension in your body. So for example, a lot of us might clench our jaw. That's something that I do. So make sure just to unclench that jaw because it's going to hurt after a while. And just get yourself relaxed before you go on stage, because if you look really tense, it's not a good look. So just making sure that you're relaxed is really helpful. So Josh, do you practice deep breathing or meditation before you go on stage? And how does this help you?
I have sometimes meditated before a performance. I think it helps me with focus and focusing on what's happening right now. I've got this mantra for myself when performing, which is focus on now. So not what happened before and not what's coming, just focus on what's happening right now and the emotions of that and how you're going to connect with people right now. Meditation for me is about not trying to think about the future and the past and just focusing on the present moment. So in that respect, it helps me get into a mindset of focusing on the present and focusing on what's happening immediately, what's happening right now. I do vocal warm-ups a lot, especially before singing. So that's a kind of breathing exercise. It's a kind of breathing work. It's not necessarily designed to relax you or to serve any meditative or calming purpose. But I think having that routine gets my lungs and my diaphragm and this whole system into a space where I'm really ready to perform. Having a routine can be soothing, whatever it is. If you find that you're not sure what to do before a performance and you're getting restless, pick any performance preparation exercise that's easy to do and do it. It doesn't have to be the perfect exercise for your performance context. It just gives you something to do. And that is valuable. That gives you a sense of preparation that occupies you and stops anxiety and restlessness from spiraling. So I think that's a lot of value in having a ritual or routine before a performance. Having one probably matters more than what it is because it gives you something to focus on and you're preparing to focus.
Tip number 5 is to improvise. So let's say you're on stage and all of a sudden you've forgotten your line and you know what happens afterwards. So you don't need to get your line perfectly exact, on the spot, perfect. But if you know kind of the gist of what you were going to say, then say that and get the show back on track. That is the number one key that I've used to make sure that I keep a performance going smoothly. Because as people say in theatre, the show must go on. And that is why improv is such an important part of acting training, because they realize that things are going to happen. And the best way to be prepared as a performer is to know is to have rehearsed, but also to be able to fix a mistake as it happens. So, Josh, have you ever had an experience where you've had to use improvisation to cover up a mistake? And what happened?
Oh, all the time. And I remember I once forgot a bit of lyrics, and so I led the audience in call and response for a while until them saying the lyrics before reminded me of what happened next. Sometimes I'll go off on tangents and stand up and not remember what we were talking about before. I think it's useful to remember at that point that you're not the only person in the room who's paying attention and who's involved. You've got a whole audience of memory resources. So at that point, I've sometimes just asked people, what were we talking about before this? And you can have a bit of fun with it. You can chastise them for forgetting. You can, whatever you failed to do, you can say, I think we all failed to remember what we were talking about. I think we all got very distracted, all went a horrible tangent, and I think we do well to be more focused. and just involve people in that. I don't think I've forgotten lines when acting. If I were to do that, I'd probably just focus on what I can control, which is the physicality of staying in character and how that character interacts with others. You know, if my character hates the character in front of me, I should stay with my angry face on, even if I can't remember the lines. It's just doing what you can control. So as I've said, if I forget what we were talking about in comedy, I can't just conjure that topic from my mind when I've forgotten it. That's the nature of forgetting, but I can ask the audience for help. If I've forgotten, it's a long time ago that I would have forgotten lyrics, but I can get the audience to do something else. If I can't remember what I wanted to do, I've just got to do something else. And if you can't remember lines when acting, just do what you can remember about your character, which is all the things that aren't lines. Control what you can. When you've forgotten the thing you want to do, stick to the things you can do.
And last but not least, tip number 6 is to focus on the task at hand. So just break it down into what are you doing in that moment. What are you supposed to be doing? Are you supposed to be gesturing? Then make sure you're gesturing. If you're supposed to be reading, for example, when I've done spoken word poetry, I usually take that moment to look down at what I'm reading and just remember, okay, I'm reading, and then glance back up at the audience because I know they're rooting for me. And just that is how usually, like, when stage fright kind of like creeps up in the middle of a performance for me, that's my number one way of just getting through it. And if I don't have something that I'm reading, then just even diverting my eyes away from the audience for a moment and looking around at the other performers on the stage or just at the stage itself reminds me, okay, I'm performing, this is what I'm doing. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up and share it with anybody who needs some help overcoming stage fright. Also, let us know in the comments below what you thought of this video, and also if you have any suggestions for future videos, let me know. And I just want to say a huge thank you to Josh Cake for collaborating with me on this video.
Thanks for having me, Viv. It's been a pleasure.
If you want to see some more of his videos, I've put a little watch next section in the comments below, as well as his YouTube channel, which you can find over here, and my YouTube channel, which you can find over here. And make sure you hit subscribe on both channels because we are consistently posting new content and we know you're going to love it. So thank you so much for watching this video, and until next time, bye!